Mildred said, "Well, now you've done it. Out front of the house, look who's here." "I don't care." "There's a Phoenix car just driven up, and a man in a black shirt with an orange snake stitched on his arm coming up the front walk." "Captain Beatty?" he said. "Captain Beatty." Montauk did not move, but he stood looking into the cold whiteness of the wall immediately before him. "Go let him in, will you? Tell him I'm sick." Montauk made sure the book was well hidden behind the pillow, climbing slowly back into the bed, arranging the covers over his knees and across his chest, half sitting, and after a while Mildred moved and went out of the room, and Captain Beatty strolled in, his hands in his pockets. "Shut the relatives up," said Beatty, looking around at everything except Montauk and his wife. This time Mildred ran. The yammering voices stopped yelling in the parlor. Captain Beatty sat down in the most comfortable chair with a peaceful look on his ruddy face. He took time to prepare and light his brass pipe and puff out a great smoke cloud. "Just thought I'd come by and see how the sick man is." "Well, or when will you be well?" "Tomorrow, the next day maybe, first of the week." Beatty puffed his pipe. "Every fireman, sooner or later, hits this. They only need understanding to know how the wheels run, need to know the history of our profession. They don't feed it to rookies like they used to. Damn shame." Puff. "Only fire chiefs remember it now." Puff. "I'll let you in on it." Mildred fidgeted. Beatty took a full minute to settle himself in and think back for what he wanted to say. When did it all start, you ask, this job of ours? How did it come about? Where? When? Well, I'd say it really got started around about a thing called the Civil War. Even though our rule book claims it was found earlier. The fact is, we didn't get along well until photography came into its own. Then motion pictures in the early 20th century, radio, televisions, things began to have mass. Montauk sat in bed, not moving. "And because they had mass, they became simpler," said Beatty. "Once books appealed to a few people, here, there, everywhere. They could afford to be different. The world was roomy. But then the world got full of eyes and elbows and mouths, double, triple, quadruple population. Films and radios, magazines, books leveled down to a sort of paste-putting norm. Do you follow me?" "I think so." Beatty peered at the smoke pattern he had put out on the air. "Picture it. 19th century man with his horse, dogs, carts, slow motion. Then in the 20th century, speed up your camera. Books cut shorter, condensations, digests, tabloids, everything boils down to the gag, the snap ending." "Snap ending," Mildred nodded. "Classics cut to fit 15-minute radio shows, then cut again to fill 2-minute book columns, winding up at last as a 10 or 12-line dictionary resume. I exaggerate, of course. The dictionaries were for reference, but many were those whose sole knowledge of Hamlet— you know the title, certainly, Montauk. It is probably only a faint rumor of a title to you, Mrs. Montauk. Whose sole knowledge, as I say, of Hamlet was a 1-page digest in a book that claimed, 'Now at least you can read all the classics, keep up with your neighbors.' Do you see? Out of the nursery into the college and back to the nursery. There's your intellectual pattern for the past 5 centuries or more." Mildred arose and began to move around the room, picking things up and putting them down. Mildred smoothed the bedclothes. Montauk felt his heart jump again as she patted his pillow. Right now, she was pulling at his shoulder to try to get him to move so she could take the pillow out and fix it nicely and put it back. And perhaps cry out and stare, or simply reach down her hand and say, "What's this?" and hold up the hidden book with touching innocence. School is shortened. Discipline relaxed, philosophies, histories, languages dropped, English and spelling gradually neglected, finally almost completely ignored. Life is immediate, the job counts. Pleasure lies all about after work. Why learn anything save pressing buttons, pulling switches, fitting nuts and bolts? Life becomes one big pratfall, Montauk. Everything bang, boff, and wow. More sports for everyone, group spirit, fun, and don't have to think, eh? Organize and super organized, super sports. More cartoons and books, more pictures. The mind drinks less and less. Impatience. Highways full of crowds going somewhere, nowhere. The gasoline refuge. Towns turn into motels, people and nomadic surges from place to place. Following the moon tides, living tonight in the room where you slept this noon and I the night before. Mildred went out of the room and slammed the door. The parlor aunts began to laugh at the parlor uncles. Now let's take up the minorities of our civilization, shall we? Bigger the population, the more minorities. Don't step on the toes of the dog lovers, the cat lovers, doctors, lawyers, merchants, chiefs, Mormons, Baptists, Unitarians, second-generation Chinese, Swedes, Italians, Germans, Texans, Brooklynites, Irishmen, people from Oregon and Mexico. The people in this book, this play, this TV serial are not meant to represent any actual painters, cartographers, mechanics anywhere. The bigger your market, Montauk, the less you handle controversy. Remember that. All the minor minorities with their navels to be kept clean. Authors full of evil thoughts, lock up your typewriters. They did. Magazines became a nice blend of vanilla tapioca. Books, so the damned snobbish critics said, were dishwater. No wonder books stopped selling, the critics said. But the public, knowing what it wanted, spinning happily, let the comic books survive. There you have it, Montauk. I didn't come from the government down. There was no dictum, no declaration, no censorship to start with, no. Technology, mass exploitation, and the minority pressure carried the trick, thank God. Today, thanks to them, you can stay happy all the time. Yes, but what about the firemen then? asked Montauk. Beatty leaned forward in the faint mist of smoke from his pipe. What more easily explained and natural? With school turning out more runners, jumpers, racers, tinkerers, grabbers, snatchers, flyers, and swimmers instead of examiners, critics, knowers, and imaginative creators, the word intellectual, of course, became the swear word it deserved to be. You always dread the unfamiliar. Sure, you remember the boy in your own school class who was exceptionally bright, did most of the reciting and answering, while the others sat like so many leaden idols, hating him. And wasn't it this bright boy you selected for beatings and tortures after hours? Of course it was. We must all be alike. Not everyone born free and equal, as the Constitution says, but everyone made equal. Each man the image of every other. Then all are happy, for there are no mountains to make them cower to judge themselves against. So, a book is a loaded gun in the house next door. Burn it. Take the shot from the weapon. Breach man's mind. Who knows who might be the target of a well-bred man? Me? I won't stomach them for a minute. And so when houses were finally fireproofed completely all over the world, you were correct in your assumption the other night. There was no longer need of firemen for the old purposes. They were given the new job, as custodians of our peace of mind, the focus of our understandable and rightful dread of being inferior, official censors, judges, and executors. That's you, Montauk, and that's me. The door to the parlor opened, and Mildred stood there, looking in at them, looking at Beatty, and then at Montauk. Behind her, the walls of the room were flooded with green and yellow and orange fireworks, sizzling and bursting to some music composed almost completely of trap drums, tom-toms, and cymbals. Her mouth moved, and she was saying something, but the sound covered it. You must understand that our civilization is so vast that we can't have our minorities upset and stirred. Ask yourself, what do we want in this country above all? People want to be happy, isn't that right? Haven't you heard it all your life? I want to be happy, people say. Well, aren't they? Don't we keep moving them? Don't we give them fun? That's all we live for, isn't it? For pleasure, for titillation. And you must admit our culture provides plenty of these. Yes. Montauk could lip-read what Mildred was saying in the door. He tried not to look at her mouth, because then Beatty might turn and read what was there, too. People of color don't like Little Black Sambo. Burn it. White people don't feel good about Uncle Tom's Cabin. Burn it. Someone's written a book on tobacco and the cancer of the lungs. The cigarette people are weeping. Burn the book. Serenity, Montauk. Peace, Montauk. Take your fight outside. Better yet, into the incinerator. Funerals are unhappy and pagan. Eliminate them too. 5 minutes after a person is dead, he's on his way to the big flu. The incinerator is serviced by helicopters all over the country. 10 minutes after death, a man's a speck of black dust. Let's not quibble over individuals with memoriams. Forget them. Burn them all. Burn everything. Fire is bright and fire is clean. The fireworks died in the parlor behind Mildred. She had stopped talking at the same time. A miraculous coincidence. Montauk held his breath. There was a girl next door, he said slowly. She's gone now. I think dead. I can't even remember her face. But she was different. How did she happen? Beatty smiled. Here or there, that's bound to occur. Clarice McClellan? We've got a record on her family. We've watched them carefully. Heredity and environment are fun things. You can't rid yourself of all the odd ducks in just a few years. The home environment can undo a lot you try to do at school. That's why we've lowered the kindergarten age year after year until now we're almost snatching them from the cradle. We had some false alarms on the McClellans when they lived in Chicago. Never found a book. Uncle had a mixed record, antisocial. The girl, she was a time bomb. The family had been feeding her subconscious, I'm sure, from what I saw of her school record. She didn't want to know how a thing was done, but why. That can be embarrassing. You ask why to a lot of different things, and you wind up very unhappy indeed. If you keep at it, the poor girl's better off dead. Yes, dead. Luckily, ones like her don't happen often. You know how to nip most of them in the bud early. You can't build a house without nails and wood. If you don't want a house built, hide the nails and wood. If you don't want a man unhappy politically, don't give him two sides to a question to worry about. Give him one. Better yet, give him none. Let him forget there is such a thing as war. If the government is inefficient, top-heavy, and tax-mad, better it be all those than that people worry over. Peace, Montauk. Give the people contests they win by remembering the words to more popular songs or the names of state capitals or how much corn Iowa grew last year. Cram them full of non-combustible data. Chock them so damn full of facts they feel stuffed but absolutely brilliant with information. Then they'll feel they're thinking. They'll get a sense of motion without moving, and they'll be happy because facts of that sort don't change. Don't give them any slippery stuff like philosophy or sociology to tie things up. That way lies melancholy. Any man who can take a TV wall apart and put it back together, and most men can nowadays, is happier than any man who tries to slide a rule, measure, and equate the universe, but which won't just be measured or equated without making man feel bestial and lonely. I know, I've tried it. To hell with it. If the drama is bad, if the film says nothing, if the play is hollow, sting me with a theremin loudly. I'll think I'm responding to the play, when it's only a tactile reaction to vibration. But I don't care. I just like solid entertainment. Beatty got up. I must be going. Lecture's over. I hope I've clarified things. The important thing for you, Montauk, is where the Happiness Boys, the Dixie Duo, you and I and the others. We stand against the small tide of those who want to make everyone unhappy with conflicting theory and thought. Hold steady. Don't let the torrent of melancholy and drear philosophy drown our world. We depend on you. I don't think you realize how important you are to our happy world as it stands. Beatty shook Montauk's limp hand. Montauk still sat as if the house were collapsing about him, and he could not move in the bed. Mildred had vanished from the door. One last thing, said Beatty. At least once in his career, every fireman gets an itch. What did the book say, he wonders. Oh, to scratch that itch, eh? Well, Montauk, take my word for it. I've had to read a few in my time to know what I was about, and the books say nothing. Nothing you can teach or believe. They're about non-existent people, figments of imagination, if they're fiction. And if they're non-fiction, it's worse. One professor calling another an idiot, one philosopher screaming down another's gullet, all of them running about, putting out the stars and extinguishing the sun. You come away lost. Well then, what if a fireman accidentally, really not intending anything, takes a book home with him? Montauk twitched. The open door looked at him with its great vacant eye. A natural error, curiosity alone, said Beatty. We don't get over-anxious or mad. We let the fireman keep the book 24 hours. If he hasn't burned it by then, we simply come and burn it for him. Of course, Montauk's mouth went dry. Well, Montauk, will you take another later shift today? Will we see you tonight, perhaps? I don't know, said Montauk. What? Beatty looked faintly surprised. Montauk shut his eyes. I'll be in later, maybe. We'd certainly miss you if you didn't show, said Beatty, putting his pipe in his pocket thoughtfully. I'll never come in again, thought Montauk. Get well and keep well, said Beatty. He turned and went out through the open door. Montauk watched through the window as Beatty drove away in his gleaming yellow flame-colored Beetle with the black char-colored tires.